Standing in the server room at TechNova Solutions, I watched our new CTO, Marcus Sterling, hover his finger over the delete key with pure malice in his eyes. "Your code is absolute garbage, Miranda. I'm deleting it," he announced with theatrical confidence, surrounded by GlobalTech executives attending virtually for our $3 billion merger finalization. The entire development team stood frozen in stunned silence. "Do it!" I challenged, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He smirked and hit delete. Instantly, the merger contract vanished from every screen in the building. "Where did it go?" He panicked frantically, clicking through empty directories. I calmly held up my USB drive. The code wasn't the product. It was the decryption key, and it just left the building. 8 years ago, I walked into TechNova Solutions fresh out of Carnegie Mellon with a computer science degree and dreams bigger than my tiny studio apartment in Pittsburgh. I was 24, broke, and determined to prove that a small-town girl from rural Ohio could compete with the tech industry's brightest minds. My interviewer was David Chen, the Chief Technology Officer, who saw potential in my unconventional approach to cybersecurity protocols. David became more than my boss during those early years. He was the mentor who stayed late helping me debug complex algorithms, the advocate who defended my innovative ideas when senior developers dismissed them as too ambitious, and the father figure I needed after losing my own dad to cancer during my sophomore year of college. Under his guidance, I built TechNova's core encryption system from the ground up, working 16-hour days to create security protocols that Fortune 500 companies trusted with their most sensitive data. My encryption system wasn't just code. It was a revolutionary approach to data protection that combined quantum-resistant algorithms with adaptive threat detection, creating digital fortresses that could withstand attacks from the most sophisticated hackers. Major corporations paid TechNova millions annually for access to security technology that I had conceived in my cramped apartment while surviving on ramen noodles and determination. 3 months ago, CEO Jennifer Walsh gathered our entire company in the main conference room to announce the acquisition that would change everything. GlobalTech Industries, a technology conglomerate worth over $50 billion, wanted to purchase TechNova for $3 billion. The driving force behind their interest was my encryption system, which they planned to integrate across their entire corporate network. I spent weeks preparing detailed documentation for the merger, organizing 8 years of development work into comprehensible packages that GlobalTech's integration team could understand and implement. Every variable was explained, every security layer documented, every potential vulnerability addressed. This was my life's work being handed over to strangers, and I wanted to ensure they understood its true value. 2 weeks before the merger finalization, David called me into his office with tears in his eyes. "I have to resign, Miranda," he said, his voice breaking. "My wife's cancer has returned, and she needs me home for treatment." I felt my world crumble. David wasn't just my professional mentor. He was the one person at TechNova who truly understood my work and appreciated my contributions. Without him, I felt like a ship losing its anchor in stormy waters. His replacement arrived with 0 transition time and immediately set off every alarm bell in my professional instincts. Marcus Sterling came from Cybercore Industries, a competing firm with a reputation for aggressive cost-cutting and employee turnover. He was 42 years old, impeccably dressed, and spoke with the kind of polished confidence that made junior developers feel inadequate and senior staff suspicious. On his first day, Marcus gathered our entire development team for what he called a culture realignment meeting. Standing at the front of our conference room in his expensive suit, he announced his intention to eliminate outdated practices and modernize our development processes. His eyes lingered on me when he mentioned removing personnel who resist necessary changes. During our first team meeting, I presented the quarterly security report that David had always praised as exemplary. Marcus interrupted me 3 times in the first 5 minutes, questioning my methodology with barely concealed condescension. "These statistics seem inflated," he said, despite having no knowledge of our client base or security metrics. "Perhaps we need more rigorous data collection procedures." The mandatory code reviews began the following week. Each senior developer was required to present their major projects for evaluation by Marcus and his hand-picked review committee. When my turn arrived, I confidently displayed the encryption protocols that had generated millions in revenue for TechNova over the past 8 years. Marcus systematically dismantled my presentation with questions designed to undermine rather than understand. He criticized my variable naming conventions as unprofessional, called my security layers unnecessarily complex, and suggested I study proper coding standards from industry professionals. His tone grew increasingly condescending as the review progressed, transforming what should have been a technical discussion into a public humiliation. The breaking point came during the final review meeting with GlobalTech executives attending virtually to observe our technical capabilities. Marcus stood up in front of 25 people and declared my encryption system amateur hour trash that reflects poorly on this company's technical standards. He announced his decision to replace my work with a properly designed alternative he had developed at Cybercore Industries. The conference room fell silent. 8 years of my life, millions of dollars in corporate revenue, and the foundation of our $3 billion merger had just been dismissed as worthless garbage by someone who had been employed here for exactly 12 days. I stared at Marcus's smug expression and realized this wasn't about code quality or technical standards. This was about him claiming credit for work that had already proven its value in the marketplace. The week following my public humiliation became a masterclass in corporate psychological warfare. Marcus launched a systematic campaign to destroy my credibility using tactics so subtle that individual incidents seemed like reasonable management decisions, while the cumulative effect devastated my professional standing. My current projects were reassigned to junior developers under the pretense of cross-training opportunities. Marcus explained to concerned team members that I was too emotionally invested in legacy systems to provide objective guidance on modern implementations. Projects I had led for months were suddenly being managed by programmers with half my experience and none of my institutional knowledge. Team meetings that had always included me were rescheduled during my lunch breaks or after hours commitments. When I asked about the schedule changes, Marcus's assistant apologetically explained that these were specialized technical discussions that didn't require my participation. I began to feel like a ghost haunting my own workplace, invisible and increasingly irrelevant. The isolation campaign extended beyond professional exclusion. Marcus restructured our development teams, breaking up partnerships that had functioned effectively for years. My closest collaborator, Jake Morrison, found himself assigned to a different floor with a schedule that prevented casual interaction. During a brief hallway encounter, Jake whispered his apology while glancing nervously around for observers. "I'm sorry, Miranda, but Marcus made it clear that supporting you means career suicide." Jake admitted, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I've got a mortgage and 2 kids in college. I can't afford to be associated with whatever's happening here." His words stung because I understood his position completely, even as I felt increasingly abandoned by people I had considered friends. Marcus began documenting what he called performance concerns in my personnel file. Every question I asked during meetings was recorded as evidence of my failure to understand basic technical concepts. Every suggestion I offered was characterized as resistance to necessary improvements and modernization efforts. When I requested clarification on project requirements, he noted my inability to work independently without excessive supervision. The documentation campaign came to light during a mandatory performance review with HR Director Patricia Williams. She spread my personnel file across her desk with obvious discomfort, pointing to recent entries that painted a picture of declining competence and disruptive behavior. "Marcus has expressed serious concerns about your recent performance, Miranda," Patricia said carefully. "He's documented several incidents suggesting you may be struggling with the transition to new leadership." I stared at the fabricated complaints in disbelief. Marcus had transformed normal workplace interactions into evidence of incompetence through carefully worded observations that contained enough truth to seem credible while completely misrepresenting context and intent. His manipulation was so sophisticated that even Patricia seemed uncertain about the accusations while feeling obligated to address them officially. The technical sabotage began during the second week of Marcus's reign. He introduced what he called optimization updates to my encryption protocols, claiming these modifications would improve performance and compatibility. I discovered that his improvements were actually subtle bugs designed to cause system errors that he could later blame on my original code design. Working overtime to identify and fix problems I hadn't created, I grew increasingly exhausted and frustrated. Each bug I corrected seemed to spawn two more, creating an endless cycle of crisis management that prevented me from working on productive projects. Marcus used these fabricated emergencies to justify his criticism of my work quality and professional reliability. Late one evening, I encountered night shift security guard Carlos Rodriguez while leaving the building after another 14-hour debugging session. Carlos was a soft-spoken man in his 50s who had worked at TechNova for over a decade, known for his attention to detail and genuine concern for employee welfare. "Ms. Henderson, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this," Carlos said quietly, "but I've noticed some unusual activity around your workstation after hours." He explained that several employees had complained about their work being mysteriously altered overnight, prompting him to pay closer attention to after-hours building access. Carlos showed me security footage from the previous week that made my blood run cold. The timestamp showed 11:30 p.m. long after I had left the building. Marcus sat at my workstation methodically accessing my code repositories and making modifications to critical system files. The footage clearly showed him introducing the very bugs he had later blamed on my incompetence. Armed with this evidence, I requested a private meeting with CEO Jennifer Walsh. I had always respected Jennifer's intelligence and integrity, believing she would want to know about the systematic manipulation happening under her leadership. However, when I arrived for our scheduled meeting, Jennifer's assistant informed me that Marcus had requested an emergency session earlier that morning to discuss urgent personnel concerns. When I finally met with Jennifer 2 hours later, her demeanor was noticeably cooler than usual. She listened politely to my explanations about the fabricated documentation and technical sabotage, but her responses suggested skepticism about my claims. "This is a stressful time for everyone, Miranda," she said diplomatically. "The merger creates pressure that affects people differently. Perhaps you're reading more into normal management decisions than is really there." Jennifer's doubt hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had successfully positioned himself as the reasonable professional dealing with a problematic employee, while I appeared to be a paranoid conspiracy theorist unable to accept legitimate criticism. His manipulation was so thorough that even presenting evidence of his sabotage made me seem unstable rather than victimized. The final revelation came during my meeting's conclusion. Jennifer mentioned that Marcus had already presented his replacement encryption system to the GlobalTech Board of Directors, describing it as a revolutionary improvement over TechNova's current technology. The board had been so impressed with his innovation that they requested an accelerated integration timeline. "Marcus will be demonstrating the new system tomorrow morning," Jennifer explained. "We're deleting your old protocols to make way for the superior technology he developed specifically for this merger." The words felt like a death sentence for 8 years of my professional life. Marcus hadn't just wanted to discredit me. He had planned to steal my work and present it as his own groundbreaking innovation to the most important audience of his career. Sleep became impossible that night. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, determined to understand the true scope of what I was facing. Marcus's rapid ascension and confident manipulation suggested preparation that went far beyond normal corporate politics. I began researching his background with the methodical precision I usually reserved for debugging complex algorithms. Cybercore Industries. Marcus's previous employer had been acquired by GlobalTech just 6 months ago in a transaction that barely made technology news. The acquisition details revealed a pattern that made my stomach churn with recognition. Cybercore's innovative security protocols bore suspicious similarities to leaked descriptions of TechNova's encryption technology, suggesting Marcus had been studying our systems long before his arrival. The deeper I investigated, the more convinced I became that Marcus's hiring wasn't coincidental. GlobalTech hadn't randomly selected him as David's replacement. They had strategically planted him to steal technology they wanted to acquire without paying full market value. This wasn't corporate incompetence or personality conflicts. This was systematic industrial espionage. At 6 a.m., exhausted but determined, I called Carlos Rodriguez at home. "I need to see more of that security footage," I told him. "Everything you have on Marcus's after-hours activities." Carlos agreed to meet me at TechNova early before the regular staff arrived for their morning routines. The additional footage revealed a pattern of suspicious behavior that extended far beyond my workstation. Marcus had been meeting secretly with unidentified individuals in our parking garage every Tuesday evening since his arrival. These meetings lasted approximately 30 minutes and always involved the exchange of documents or electronic devices. I became suspicious because these visitors never checked in with security, Carlos explained while fast-forwarding through weeks of recordings. Company policy requires all after-hours guests to register with my desk, but these people just drove directly to the back parking area where Marcus waited for them. The meetings followed a consistent pattern. Marcus would arrive at the garage around 9 p.m. carrying a briefcase and laptop bag. A black sedan with tinted windows would arrive exactly 15 minutes later, parking in the darkest corner of the lot. Two individuals would emerge from the vehicle, spend 20 to 30 minutes reviewing documents with Marcus, then leave as quietly as they had arrived. I called my college roommate Ashley Thompson, now a forensic accountant with expertise in corporate fraud investigations. Ashley had helped me navigate financial aid applications during school and had maintained her protective instincts toward friends she considered family. When I explained my situation, she immediately offered to investigate the financial connections between Marcus GlobalTech and Cybercore Industries. Industrial espionage cases always leave money trails, Ashley explained over the phone while I drove to her downtown office. If Marcus has been systematically stealing technology, there will be payments, contracts, or financial arrangements that prove coordination between multiple parties. Ashley's analysis revealed a web of financial relationships that confirmed my worst suspicions. GlobalTech had been quietly acquiring patents and technology from companies where Marcus previously worked, creating a portfolio of innovations that were actually stolen intellectual property. The pattern suggested a systematic operation spanning several years and dozens of victims. "Look at this timeline," Ashley said, spreading financial documents across her conference room table. Marcus joins a company, works there for 6 to 12 months, then leaves just before GlobalTech announces a major acquisition or technology partnership. Every single time the acquired technology matches the specialty of the company, Marcus just left. The personal revelation struck me while reviewing Marcus's employment history. Robert Chen David's younger brother had worked as lead developer at Marcus's previous company before being forced into early retirement due to what company records described as performance issues and inability to adapt to modern development practices. David had never mentioned this connection, but it explained his sudden resignation and emotional distress. He had recognized Marcus's name and understood what was about to happen, but couldn't warn me without compromising his brother's legal settlement or revealing information covered by non-disclosure agreements. David's departure wasn't about his wife's health. It was about protecting himself from being forced to participate in my professional destruction. I spent the afternoon analyzing Marcus's replacement encryption system using techniques David had taught me for identifying plagiarized code. The results were damning. Marcus's revolutionary system was essentially my own work with cosmetic changes designed to obscure its origins. Variable names had been altered, comments removed, and functions reordered, but the core algorithms, security protocols, and error handling routines were identical to my original design. More disturbing was the realization that Marcus had been copying my work for months before revealing his intentions. The system he planned to demonstrate tomorrow included innovations I had developed just weeks ago, proving he had been accessing my files and stealing my ideas throughout his entire tenure at TechNova. The crucial discovery came while organizing my personal files for what I assumed would be my final day at the company. My encryption system contained a hidden security feature I had implemented as insurance against exactly this type of corporate theft. Every piece of critical code included embedded digital signatures and timestamps that would prove my authorship in any legal dispute. More importantly, my system required a specific decryption key to unlock the primary merger database containing all GlobalTech integration materials. This master key existed nowhere in the documented codebase that Marcus had been studying. It was stored separately on my personal encrypted drive as a safeguard against unauthorized access or system compromise. Marcus's confidence stemmed from his belief that he had complete access to my encryption technology. He had no idea that the most critical component of the system, the master decryption protocol, had always been isolated from the main codebase. Without this key, his stolen system would appear to function perfectly during basic testing, but would fail catastrophically when anyone attempted to access the actual merger data. The irony was perfect. Marcus had spent months stealing technology he couldn't actually use, preparing for a demonstration that would expose his fraud to the very executives he was trying to impress. His arrogance and impatience had led him into a trap of his own making. At 7 p.m., my phone rang with a call that changed everything. David Chen's voice was quiet but urgent. "Miranda, I need you to listen carefully without asking questions until I finish explaining," he said. "I'm working with federal investigators to build a case against Marcus and GlobalTech's corporate espionage operation. My resignation wasn't about family health issues. It was to avoid compromising an ongoing criminal investigation." David explained that FBI cybercrime investigators had been tracking GlobalTech's acquisition pattern for 18 months. Every company they acquired followed the same pattern. Talented developers were discredited and replaced. Then their innovations mysteriously appeared in GlobalTech products months later. The investigators needed evidence of active theft to support prosecution, and my case could provide the definitive proof they required. "I know asking you to endure one more day seems cruel," David said, "but we need Marcus to incriminate himself publicly tomorrow. Let him proceed with his demonstration exactly as planned. Federal agents will be recording everything, and we'll have enough evidence to prosecute everyone involved in this conspiracy." David's final warning sent chills down my spine. "Security will escort you out immediately after Marcus deletes your code tomorrow morning. He's already arranged for your termination to prevent any interference with his demonstration. Act normally, don't let him suspect you know what's happening, and trust that justice will be served." David arranged to meet me at a 24-hour diner 15 miles from TechNova, far enough from the office to avoid accidental encounters with colleagues. When I arrived at midnight, I found him sitting in a back corner booth with a woman I didn't recognize, both of them looking like they hadn't slept in days. "Miranda, this is FBI agent Sarah Martinez," David said quietly as I slid into the booth. "She's leading the investigation into GlobalTech's corporate espionage operation. Everything we discuss tonight is confidential and protected under federal witness protection protocols." Agent Martinez was a sharp-featured woman in her early 40s with the kind of intense focus that made me understand why criminals feared federal investigators. She explained that the FBI had been tracking GlobalTech's systematic theft of intellectual property across multiple states, but needed evidence of active coordination between Marcus and his handlers to build a prosecutable case. "Corporate espionage is notoriously difficult to prove in court," Agent Martinez explained. "We can document suspicious financial transactions and employment patterns, but we need recorded admissions of criminal intent to convince a jury that these weren't coincidental business decisions." The plan they outlined was both simple and terrifying. I would proceed normally with tomorrow's demonstration, encouraging Marcus to follow through with his deletion of my code, while recording devices captured his reactions and admissions. Federal agents would be positioned throughout the building as consultants and technical observers to witness the entire proceeding. "Marcus believes he's in complete control of tomorrow's demonstration," Agent Martinez said. "His arrogance will work against him when your encryption key revelation forces him to explain how his system connects to yours. Under pressure from GlobalTech executives, he'll likely admit to basing his work on your original code." David revealed additional details about the investigation that made my personal situation feel like part of something much larger and more important. GlobalTech has destroyed dozens of careers and stolen millions of dollars in intellectual property, he said. "Your case could be the key that unlocks justice for everyone who's been victimized by their operation." I spent the remaining hours before dawn preparing evidence and coordinating with the investigation team. Agent Martinez provided me with sophisticated recording equipment disguised as normal workplace accessories, including a pen that captured high-definition audio and a badge holder that recorded video from multiple angles. The technical preparation required creating comprehensive backups of all evidence while ensuring Marcus remained unaware of my preparations. I documented every piece of stolen code with timestamps and digital signatures, created detailed logs of his unauthorized access to my workstation, and organized security footage that proved his coordination with external operatives. Ashley arrived at my apartment at 5 a.m. with coffee moral support and additional financial evidence she had uncovered during her overnight analysis. "I found payments from GlobalTech to shell companies controlled by Marcus," she announced triumphantly. "He's been receiving regular compensation for intelligence gathering since before he was officially hired by TechNova." We spent an hour reviewing the emotional weight of 8 years of work being stolen and vandalized by someone who viewed my innovations as commodities to be acquired rather than creative achievements to be respected. Ashley reminded me that fighting back wasn't just about personal vindication, it was about protecting every future developer from similar exploitation. "You're not just defending your own work," Ashley said while helping me organize evidence files. "You're standing up for the principle that innovation should be rewarded, not stolen. Every developer who comes after you will benefit from the precedent you set today." The legal briefing with Agent Martinez covered specific procedures for gathering admissible evidence during the confrontation. I would need to ensure that any recorded admissions were made voluntarily without coercion or entrapment. The goal was to create circumstances where Marcus's own words and actions would incriminate him beyond any reasonable doubt. "Remember that everything you say and do will be scrutinized by defense attorneys," Agent Martinez warned. "Stay calm, be truthful, and let Marcus reveal his guilt through his own responses to the situation. Don't try to trick him into confessing, just give him enough rope to hang himself." At 7 a.m., I called my parents in rural Ohio to share what I could about the situation without compromising the investigation. My father, a retired factory worker who had always emphasized the importance of standing up to bullies, listened quietly before offering the encouragement I needed to proceed. "Honey, your mother and I raised you to do what's right even when it's difficult," he said in his steady, reassuring voice. "Sometimes the most important battles are the ones where you're protecting other people who can't protect themselves. We're proud of you for having the courage to fight back." My mother, a retired elementary school teacher with decades of experience dealing with difficult personalities, offered practical wisdom that helped calm my pre-confrontation anxiety. "The truth has a way of revealing itself when people are under pressure," she said. "Trust in your preparation, stay focused on facts rather than emotions, and remember that bullies often defeat themselves when their victims refuse to be intimidated." The final discovery came during my last review of security footage with Carlos Rodriguez. While examining recordings from the previous month, we found evidence that Marcus's espionage extended far beyond my encryption technology. He had been photographing confidential documents from multiple departments, including merger contracts, employee files, and technical specifications for projects I hadn't even known existed. "This isn't just about stealing your code," Carlos said grimly. "This is about systematic intelligence gathering that could compromise our entire business operation." He's been building a complete picture of TechNova's capabilities and vulnerabilities for his handlers at GlobalTech. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Marcus hadn't simply targeted me as an individual victim. He had infiltrated TechNova as part of a comprehensive operation to acquire intelligence that would give GlobalTech enormous advantages in future negotiations and competitive scenarios. My personal fight had become part of exposing a criminal enterprise that threatened the entire technology industry. At 8:30 a.m., Jennifer Walsh called my personal phone with an apology that surprised me completely. "Miranda, I owe you an explanation and an apology," she said, her voice heavy with regret. "I've been conducting my own investigation into Marcus's background, and I discovered discrepancies in his employment history that raised serious questions about his integrity and motivations." Jennifer revealed that she had found evidence of suspicious financial transactions between Marcus and external parties, along with inconsistencies in his professional references that suggested coordination between multiple organizations. "I should have listened to your concerns more carefully," she admitted. "I let my focus on the merger deadline prevent me from recognizing obvious warning signs." The conversation ended with Jennifer's request that I proceed with the morning's demonstration, while she coordinated with what she described as external authorities, who had expressed interest in observing the proceedings. I realized that Jennifer had been cooperating with the federal investigation longer than I had known, adding another layer of preparation and coordination to the trap being set for Marcus. Standing in my apartment, surrounded by evidence of months of systematic betrayal and manipulation, I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me. The fear and uncertainty that had dominated my thoughts for weeks were replaced by clear purpose and determination. Today wasn't just about defending my work or my reputation. It was about ensuring that justice would be served for everyone who had been victimized by Marcus and his collaborators. I arrived at TechNova 30 minutes early to find the main conference room transformed into what looked like a corporate theater. Rows of chairs faced a massive wall-mounted display connected to our primary server system, with additional screens positioned throughout the room to ensure every observer had a clear view of the proceedings. The audience was unlike anything I had seen in 8 years at the company. TechNova employees filled the front rows, many looking uncomfortable about attending what they assumed would be my professional execution. Multiple screens showed GlobalTech executives in their corporate boardroom, their faces displaying the serious attention that $3 billion decisions commanded. Most interesting were the unfamiliar faces scattered throughout the audience. Individuals I didn't recognize who carried themselves with the alert professionalism of people accustomed to high-stakes situations. Agent Martinez sat in the third row disguised as a technical consultant, her recording equipment concealed within a standard business portfolio. Marcus entered the room with theatrical confidence, carrying a leather presentation folder and wearing his most expensive suit. He had clearly spent considerable time preparing for this moment, viewing it as the pinnacle of his professional career. His smile carried the satisfaction of someone who believed he had successfully orchestrated the perfect crime. The presentation began with Marcus delivering a polished speech about eliminating outdated systems and embracing innovative technology solutions. He used sophisticated technical language designed to impress the GlobalTech executives while systematically dismantling my professional reputation through carefully worded criticisms. Legacy code represents more than just inefficiency, Marcus declared, gesturing toward the screens displaying my encryption protocols. It reflects outdated thinking that prevents organizations from achieving their full technological potential. Today, we're going to witness the transformation from amateur programming to professional excellence. His performance was masterful in its cruelty. Every slide contained subtle insults directed at my capabilities disguised as objective technical analysis. He described my security protocols as overly complex solutions to simple problems, my documentation as inadequate for professional standards, and my overall approach as fundamentally flawed by inexperience and poor training. Several of my colleagues looked increasingly uncomfortable as Marcus's criticism grew more personal and vindictive. Jake Morrison stared at his hands while other developers shifted nervously in their seats. The GlobalTech executives, however, appeared impressed by Marcus's confident demeanor and authoritative presentation style. The moment of truth arrived when Marcus dramatically highlighted the section of code he intended to delete. This represents everything wrong with TechNova's current approach to cybersecurity. He announced, his finger hovering over the delete key. Eliminating this inefficient code is the first step toward implementing the superior system I've developed specifically for our merger with GlobalTech. The room fell silent as everyone waited for my expected panic and desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, I surprised Marcus and everyone else by encouraging him to proceed. "Delete it," I said calmly, my voice carrying clearly throughout the stunned conference room. "If you believe your system is superior, then prove it by removing what you consider inferior work." Marcus's confident expression flickered momentarily as he processed my unexpected response. He had clearly anticipated tears, arguments, or desperate negotiations that would make him appear magnanimous when he ultimately proceeded with the deletion. My calm encouragement disrupted his scripted narrative and forced him to continue without the dramatic resistance he had planned to overcome. "You're certain you want me to proceed?" Marcus asked, his voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty I had heard since his arrival at TechNova. The question was designed to give me one final opportunity to beg for mercy, providing the humiliation he craved before delivering his devastating blow. "I'm absolutely certain," I replied with growing confidence. "Delete every line of code you consider worthless. Show everyone in this room the superiority of your alternative system. Prove that my 8 years of work were as meaningless as you claim." Marcus's fingers stabbed the delete key with vindictive satisfaction, expecting applause from the GlobalTech executives and grateful acknowledgement of his decisive leadership. Instead, within seconds of the deletion completing, every screen in the conference room displaying merger-related data went completely blank. The $3 billion acquisition contract vanished. Financial projections disappeared, integration timelines evaporated, client databases became inaccessible. The entire digital foundation of TechNova's merger with GlobalTech simply ceased to exist, leaving dozens of screens displaying nothing but empty directories and error messages. The silence in the conference room was deafening. Marcus stared at his laptop screen in growing horror, frantically clicking through directories that should have contained his replacement system. The GlobalTech executives began demanding immediate explanations for the complete system failure occurring during their most important business acquisition of the year. "What happened to the data?" shouted Richard Blackstone, GlobalTech's chief executive officer, his voice crackling through the conference room speakers with barely controlled fury. "We're supposed to be finalizing a $3 billion transaction, and now we can't access any of the integration materials." Marcus's professional composure crumbled as he realized that his moment of triumph had transformed into a catastrophic failure witnessed by the most important audience of his career. His hands shook as he attempted to access backup systems that should have contained his replacement encryption protocols, only to discover that they were completely non-functional. "There must be some kind of system error," Marcus stammered, his voice rising with panic as he desperately tried to restore access to the vanished data. "My replacement protocols are clearly superior to the deleted system. This shouldn't be possible." I stood up slowly, holding my USB drive where everyone in the room could see it clearly. The small device seemed impossibly insignificant compared to the chaos it had just created, but its presence commanded absolute attention from every person in the conference room. "The code you just deleted wasn't the actual encryption system," I explained calmly, my voice carrying clearly throughout the stunned silence. "It was the decryption key that provided access to all merger-related databases. The real security protocols were always stored separately as protection against exactly this type of unauthorized deletion." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. His face went pale as he began to understand the magnitude of his error. He had spent months studying and copying what he believed was my complete encryption system, never realizing that the most critical component was isolated from the main codebase he had been accessing. "Without the master decryption key, your stolen system is completely useless." I continued, holding up the USB drive that contained the only copy of the access protocol. "You've been copying the appearance of my work without understanding its underlying architecture. Your replacement system is nothing more than an empty shell that looks impressive but can't actually protect or access any real data." Marcus's attempt to explain the situation to the furious GlobalTech executives only made his predicament worse. Under intense pressure from people expecting immediate solutions to a $3 billion crisis, he inadvertently admitted that his replacement system had been based on careful analysis of TechNova's existing protocols. "Based on analysis," interrupted Jennifer Walsh, who had been quietly observing from the back of the room. "Marcus, are you saying that your revolutionary new system was derived from Miranda's original work rather than being an independent innovation?" The question trapped Marcus between lying to his new employers or admitting to intellectual property theft in front of dozens of witnesses and recording devices. His panicked response provided the incriminating evidence that Agent Martinez and her team needed to build their criminal case. "I improved upon the existing framework," Marcus protested desperately. "I took her amateur code and transformed it into something actually useful. That's what real professionals do when they encounter substandard work that needs to be fixed." His words were precisely what the federal investigators had hoped to record. Marcus had just admitted to unauthorized copying and modification of my intellectual property, providing clear evidence of the systematic theft that formed the foundation of GlobalTech's corporate espionage operation. The conference room erupted as David Chen entered, accompanied by Agent Martinez and 2 additional federal investigators. David's presence shocked everyone who believed he had resigned due to family health issues, while the FBI credentials displayed by the investigators sent ripples of panic through the GlobalTech executives attending virtually. This demonstration was conducted as part of a federal investigation into systematic corporate espionage, Agent Martinez announced, her authoritative voice cutting through the confused murmurs filling the room. "We have recorded evidence of intellectual property theft, industrial espionage, and conspiracy to defraud multiple technology companies." Marcus's laptop and personal devices were immediately secured as evidence, while he stood in stunned disbelief, finally understanding that he had walked directly into a carefully orchestrated trap. The confident professional who had entered the room expecting triumphant vindication was now facing federal criminal charges for his systematic theft of intellectual property. The GlobalTech executives who had been so impressed by Marcus's presentation moments earlier now faced the horrifying realization that their entire acquisition strategy was based on stolen technology. Their angry demands for explanations transformed into panicked consultations with legal teams as they recognized the massive liability exposure they had just inherited. The immediate aftermath of Marcus's exposure created chaos that rippled far beyond TechNova's conference room. FBI agents secured his workstation laptop and personal devices while he stood in handcuffs, his face displaying the shock of someone whose carefully constructed world had collapsed in a matter of minutes. Agent Martinez efficiently coordinated with her team to preserve evidence while explaining the federal charges Marcus would face. Conspiracy to commit industrial espionage, theft of trade secrets, wire fraud, and violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, she listed methodically. Each charge carries substantial prison time and financial penalties. Marcus's protests about being set up and entrapped only strengthened the evidence against him. His outraged demands to speak with his contacts at GlobalTech inadvertently revealed the coordination between multiple parties that the investigators needed to prove conspiracy charges. The GlobalTech executives attending virtually began disconnecting from the conference call one by one as they realized the legal implications of their association with Marcus's criminal activities. Their investment in stolen technology exposed them to massive lawsuits from every company whose intellectual property had been compromised through their systematic espionage operation. I used my encryption key to restore access to all merger-related databases, demonstrating the sophisticated security protocols I had designed to protect against exactly this type of corporate theft. The system worked flawlessly, impressing the remaining observers with its elegant efficiency and robust protection capabilities. "This is what $3 billion of legitimate innovation looks like," I said while navigating through the restored data structures. Every security layer, every access protocol, and every protection mechanism was designed to prevent unauthorized access while maintaining seamless functionality for legitimate users. My colleagues who had remained silent during Marcus's campaign of harassment began offering apologies and explanations for their complicity. Jake Morrison approached me with tears in his eyes, finally understanding the scope of the conspiracy he had inadvertently supported through his silence. "I'm sorry, Miranda," Jake said quietly. "I was so focused on protecting my own job that I didn't recognize what Marcus was doing to you. I should have spoken up when I saw him undermining your work and discrediting your contributions." Other team members shared similar regrets, describing their growing discomfort with Marcus's treatment of me and their relief at learning the truth about his criminal activities. Several admitted they had suspected his technical knowledge was based on stolen information, but lacked the courage to challenge his authority. Jennifer Walsh addressed the entire company later that afternoon, publicly apologizing for failing to recognize the warning signs of Marcus's criminal behavior. "I allowed my focus on the merger timeline to cloud my judgment about obvious red flags," she admitted. "Miranda tried to warn us about systematic manipulation and theft, but I dismissed her concerns as personality conflicts rather than recognizing them as evidence of criminal activity." The apology was accompanied by my immediate promotion to Chief Technology Officer, the position Marcus had briefly occupied, along with a substantial salary increase and equity package that recognized my true value to the company. "Miranda's integrity and innovation have always been the foundation of TechNova's success," Jennifer announced. "It's time we acknowledge that fact officially." News of the corporate espionage case spread rapidly throughout the technology industry, generating widespread media coverage about the systematic theft of intellectual property and the courage required to expose such elaborate criminal conspiracies. Multiple publications requested interviews about my experience and the broader implications for developer rights and corporate ethics. The industry recognition was both gratifying and overwhelming. Technology magazines featured my story as an example of how individual courage could expose systematic corruption, while professional organizations invited me to speak at conferences about protecting intellectual property and recognizing workplace manipulation tactics. FBI agent Martinez explained that my evidence would be crucial in prosecuting similar cases against other companies in GlobalTech's network of stolen technology. Your willingness to cooperate with this investigation could help dozens of developers who lost their careers to similar schemes, she said. We've identified at least 15 other cases where GlobalTech acquired technology through suspicious circumstances involving recently hired employees. The financial impact on GlobalTech was immediate and devastating. Their stock price plummeted as investors recognized the legal liability associated with their business model of acquiring stolen technology. Several pending acquisitions were canceled when target companies realized the pattern of intellectual property theft underlying GlobalTech's rapid expansion. David Chen returned to TechNova as Senior Technical Advisor, working directly with me to strengthen our security protocols and mentor the next generation of developers. Our relationship, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to ethical technology development, became stronger than ever. "I'm sorry I couldn't warn you about Marcus more directly," David said during our first private meeting after his return. "The federal investigation required maintaining cover even when I knew you were suffering from his psychological warfare tactics. Your courage in standing up to him made the entire case possible." The legal resolution moved quickly once federal prosecutors had recorded evidence of Marcus's criminal admissions. Facing overwhelming evidence and the prospect of decades in federal prison, Marcus agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony revealed the full scope of GlobalTech's corporate espionage network. 3 months after the confrontation, I received a call from Congresswoman Maria Rodriguez, chair of the House Subcommittee on Technology and Innovation. "Ms. Henderson, we're conducting hearings on corporate espionage in the technology sector," she explained. "We'd like you to testify about your experience and provide recommendations for legislation protecting developers' intellectual property rights." The invitation to testify before Congress represented an opportunity to transform my personal experience into systemic change that would protect countless other developers from similar exploitation. The prospect of speaking truth to power on behalf of everyone who had been victimized by corporate espionage felt like the ultimate vindication of my decision to fight back rather than accept defeat. 6 months later, I stood in my new corner office overlooking downtown Pittsburgh, reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed since that morning when Marcus deleted my code with such vindictive confidence. The USB drive that had contained my encryption key sat on my desk as a permanent reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything. TechNova had transformed under my leadership as Chief Technology Officer. We implemented transparent review processes and ethical guidelines that protected all employees from the kind of exploitation I had experienced. Our company's reputation for integrity attracted top talent from across the industry and premium clients who valued ethical business practices. The mentorship program I established for young developers had become a model for other technology companies. Every week, I met with junior programmers to teach them both technical skills and professional self-advocacy. My story served as a cautionary tale about recognizing and responding to workplace manipulation while inspiring others to trust their instincts and stand up for their principles. The most important lesson isn't about code or corporate politics, I told my mentees during our regular sessions. It's about understanding that your worth as a professional isn't determined by other people's recognition. Your innovations have value independent of whether bullies acknowledge that value, and protecting your integrity often means protecting principles that benefit everyone. The federal legislation inspired by my congressional testimony passed with overwhelming bipartisan support, creating legal protections for developers and establishing severe penalties for corporate intellectual property theft. The Miranda Protocol, as the law became known informally, included provisions for whistleblower protection, mandatory disclosure of technology origins, and criminal penalties for systematic trade secret theft. My testimony before Congress had been both terrifying and empowering, speaking to representatives from across the country about the importance of protecting innovation and preventing corporate espionage. I realized that my personal fight had become part of a much larger conversation about ethics in technology development. When we protect individual developers from exploitation, I told the subcommittee during my testimony, we're protecting the innovation that drives American technological leadership. Every time we allow bullies to steal credit for other people's work, we discourage the creativity and risk-taking that makes our industry possible. The personal relationships deepened by my experience had become some of the most important connections in my life. Ashley Thompson had left forensic accounting to join TechNova as our chief financial officer, bringing her expertise in detecting financial fraud to help other companies identify corporate espionage. Carlos Rodriguez received recognition and a promotion for his crucial role in documenting Marcus's criminal activities. Agent Martinez and I began dating 8 months after the investigation concluded, both of us drawn to partners who understood the importance of fighting for justice, even when facing overwhelming odds. Sarah had left the FBI to establish a corporate security consulting firm, helping technology companies protect themselves against the kind of systematic infiltration that had nearly destroyed my career. My parents visited more frequently now, finally understanding the nature of my work and the significance of my professional achievements. During their most recent visit, my father stood in my office looking out at the city skyline with obvious pride. "Your mother and I always knew you were special," he said quietly. "But seeing how you stood up to people trying to steal your life's work, that takes a different kind of strength. You didn't just save your own career. You probably saved a lot of other people from the same kind of treatment." The industry recognition continued to grow as my story became a case study in business schools and professional development programs. The Technology Ethics Leadership Award from the International Association of Computer Professionals was accompanied by speaking invitations from universities and conferences around the world. My acceptance speech for the Ethics Award focused on the lesson that had emerged from my experience with Marcus and GlobalTech. The most powerful code we can write isn't technological, I told the audience of industry professionals. It's the courage to stand up for ourselves and others when we witness injustice. When we protect our own integrity, we often discover we're also protecting principles that benefit everyone. TechNova's success under ethical leadership had become a demonstration that integrity and profitability weren't mutually exclusive. Our revenue had increased substantially as clients sought partners they could trust with their most sensitive data, while our employee satisfaction scores reached industry-leading levels. The company's transformation extended far beyond financial metrics. We had created a workplace culture where innovation was rewarded rather than stolen, where diverse perspectives were valued rather than silenced, and where young developers could pursue ambitious projects without fear of having their work appropriated by senior colleagues. David Chen and I collaborated on developing new encryption technologies that pushed the boundaries of data protection while maintaining the ethical standards that had always guided our work. Our research focused on creating security systems that protected not just corporate information, but individual privacy rights in an increasingly connected world. The global impact of our case had inspired similar investigations in other countries, leading to international cooperation agreements designed to prevent cross-border intellectual property theft. Technology companies around the world began implementing stronger protections for their developers and more rigorous screening processes for senior hires. Looking back on the experience, I realized that my greatest victory hadn't been exposing Marcus's theft or receiving industry recognition. It had been learning to value myself enough to fight for what was right, regardless of the personal cost. The confidence I gained from standing up to systematic manipulation had transformed every aspect of my professional and personal life. The life lesson that emerged from months of betrayal and ultimate vindication was profound in its simplicity. When we refuse to accept injustice, even when fighting back seems impossible, we often discover hidden allies and untapped strength. The courage to expose wrongdoing not only protects ourselves, but creates precedents that protect countless others. Standing in my office each morning, I kept Marcus's USB drive on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the smallest acts of integrity can have enormous consequences. The moment I challenged him to delete my code, everything changed. Not because of sophisticated technology or legal maneuvering, but because I finally had the courage to trust my own worth and stand up to a bully. The greatest security system isn't technological. It's the moral courage to expose wrongdoing and fight for justice, even when the odds seem overwhelming. Every developer who refuses to accept stolen credit, every employee who speaks up against manipulation, and every person who chooses truth over convenience contributes to a professional culture where innovation thrives and integrity matters. My story proved that when we protect our own dignity and principles, we often end up protecting something far more valuable. The idea that hard work should be rewarded, creativity should be recognized, and innovation should benefit the people who create it, rather than the bullies who try to steal it. 6 years later, the technology industry had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Young developers approached their careers with greater awareness of intellectual property rights and more confidence in challenging authority when they witnessed unethical behavior. The Miranda Protocol had been enforced in dozens of cases, protecting innovations and punishing corporate espionage. But the change I treasured most was personal. Every morning when I arrived at TechNova, I felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had fought for her principles and won. Not just in terms of career advancement or financial reward, but in the deeper sense of knowing that when tested, I had chosen courage over comfort and integrity over expedience. The USB drive on my desk would always remind me that sometimes the most important code we write isn't in computers. It's in how we choose to live our lives when facing impossible odds. That morning when Marcus tried to delete my life's work, I learned that the strongest encryption isn't technological. It's the unbreakable determination to stand up for what's right, no matter how many people try to convince us we're wrong. Have you ever had to stand up to a workplace bully or fight to protect something you created? Share your story in the comments below. If this story inspired you to value your own contributions more highly, please like this video to help other people find the courage to stand up for themselves. Subscribe for more stories about ordinary people who found extraordinary courage when facing impossible odds, and share this with anyone who needs to remember that their work and integrity have value that no one can take away. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that sometimes the smallest acts of courage can change everything, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who comes after us.